Hello, my name is Adam Eason and welcome to episode 76 of Hypnosis Weekly. Hello, Hypnosis friends, and a very warm welcome to Hypnosis Weekly. Once again, in my own highly biased opinion, I think I have an awe-inspiring show lined up for you today. In a short while, I'll be sharing with you this week's interview with my guest, Melvin Marsh. Then, instead of the usual hypnosis in the news section, I'm going to get right on my soapbox once again, as I tend to do on occasion, and talk about why I think prominent hypnotherapists and hypnotherapy training schools need to know how to take criticism. We then return with our professional discussion. With this week's guest, Melvin Marsh, we'll be talking about his work using hypnotherapy within the transgender community. And there's a great deal of insight to be gained from that today. We'll round things off with this week's evidence-based factoid before I bid you farewell for another week. As I say at the beginning of every Hypnosis Weekly episode, this podcast is something that I want to encompass a feeling of embracing diversity, celebrating the field of hypnosis, and encouraging friendly, professional, enjoyable discussion and debate, as well as doing its best to inform and educate. I do not share the same stance as most of our guests and at times have major differences in approach and leaning, but all are incredibly lovely people who I'd happily talk with until late in the pub, and all of whom, following their time here on Hypnosis Weekly, I have a great deal of respect for. If you have questions, queries, thoughts, or feedback, do get in touch via the Hypnosis Weekly website. All the references made in the discussions, along with related links, are posted at each episode on the website www.hypnosis-weekly.com. That's just Hypnosis Weekly with a hyphen in the middle.com. You can add your thoughts, comments, make any suggestions there too. Please do share this podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and anywhere else to help us reach more of the hypnosis community. It's greatly appreciated. If you enjoy this podcast, please do go give us a favourable rating. Even a review at iTunes. I'll be a BFF if you do. And it takes a couple of seconds, 1 or 2 clicks, just to give us a favourable rating. And please do that. It helps us out a great deal. So, first of all, today is this week's interview with Melvin Marsh. Melvin has a fascinating and inspiring backstory that gets discussed to some extent in this initial interview, and then a lot more depth later on in our discussion with regards to his own transgender journey. His experience and specialist understanding is one I respect greatly. And before we got underway, I had to check that I was communicating about the subject correctly and making sure that there wasn't any incorrect use of terminology. I didn't want to come across as a complete Luddite, no more than usual anyway. We'll get on to that specialist subject later on. For now, we'll concentrate on hypnosis and getting to know Melvin and his stance. So, for now, get comfy, my friends, turn up the volume, sip on your tea. Enjoy this week's interview. So, as I've just been discussing, I am delighted to be joined on Hypnosis Weekly this week by the one and only Melvin Marsh. Melvin, welcome to Hypnosis Weekly.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all. Tell us, how did you get into this field? What's your background? How have you arrived at where you are now?
Well, I will first of all state that this is definitely not what I ever planned when I graduated from college or graduate school. Matter of fact, if you had said anything about me being a hypnotist, say 15 years ago, I would have laughed at you and then probably begged you for a session. I figured if I was going to ever do this I was going to be a professional subject. Now, something that I was doing 15 years ago, right around that time, was I started performing volunteer work as a mental health counselor. I was not performing hypnotherapy, but I was mostly working with the transgender community.
Yeah.
I worked a lot with people who were literally on the edge of suicide. My cell phone number was probably plastered on trans forums as a number to call in, like just at least certainly mostly in the southern United States.
Right.
I was like, if you can't get to your therapist, call me. I won't particularly, be upset. I'd be more upset if you did something that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
This can be very permanent.
Yeah.
But that was 10, 15 years ago or so. I remember having my daughter be very little. She's 14 now, and just sort of hoping that the phone wouldn't ring because she was little and I didn't want her to wake up. I probably, during the time I was active, probably talked to about 1,000 people.
Wow.
And I certainly burned out because the trans community can be very intense.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the training to save the world. Now, this is, like I said, not anything that I majored in school.
No.
Now, my actual academic background is biological anthropology, is my bachelor's,
Right.
and space studies, it was my master's.
Right. So pretty different.
They're a little bit different. You can say that was a little bit different. And I mean, when I went to graduate school, I didn't even have the background to actually really even begin the program, but it worked.
Yeah.
I'm very eclectic. I did do a lot of research, assistant type jobs, both graduate and graduate school, which a lot of that involved stress.
Yeah.
I kept trying to avoid the subject of stress, but it kept finding me. And I had certainly my own set of issues.
Yeah.
And at one point, with all the crazy stuff that was going on, I decided that between my research career and all this and various other things, that I wanted to go back to medical school and to try to get an MD and help the trans community there. That's of course not psychological, but it's biological. It was going to be a little bit easier, and I was hoping to not have a burnout.
Yeah.
But when I started medical school, I was advised to seek help for my own anxiety problem, which I'd had from small child on. In all fairness, I come by it honestly. I'm the third person in my family with an anxiety problem, third generation. That particular therapist on intake suggested hypnotherapy. I declined that. I looked at him like he was a space alien, because I was like, dude, this is the first time we're ever meeting, and the answer would be, I don't know you well enough to go anywhere in my mind, and if you think I'm clucking like a chicken or barking like a dog, I'll end you. I was really, really scared of that suggestion.
Yeah.
And very uncertain about it. But I ended up having to go on a leave of absence from medical school. I actually got sexually assaulted, and had a few hospital stays, not psychological ones, but I ended up with a heart problem. I ended up with an internal organ rupturing from various assaults.
Oh no.
I live in the South, the southern part of the United States, in Augusta, Georgia. It is not very friendly. Every horrible thing you see about Southerners in the U.S., probably we have seen in this city. And this is the most conservative place I've ever lived. I've lived in the South my entire life. But when I was on my leave of absence, I said, okay, well, maybe Bill had something about this hypnotherapy thing. Let me look into it. I actually found an online course, actually through Groupon, with this guy in the UK, and I was like, okay, well, I just want to learn what this person would have done to me, and I really liked the course, and I said, I'm going to research a little bit more. Found another course, this one at Hypnosis Motivation Institute. Said, okay, and so I was like, this is a good thing. I just want to learn. And then I went on Psychology Today and looked for somebody local who did hypnotherapy. I did this after I said to my psychiatrist, is this a good idea? And she's like, with how resistant you are to medications, look, hypnotherapy tends to work, and it tends to work very well. But there weren't that many hypnotherapists in the area. but subconsciously I was drawn to this one dude next town over. Well, actually, like 30 minutes, 45 minutes away. And when I went through everyone's qualifications, I was again drawn now consciously to this guy. And he was a well-qualified psychotherapist who did a lot of hypnotherapy. I Googled this poor man half to death looking for any reasons to say no to this idea. I tend to do best with indirect suggestions, and he was influenced by Milton Erickson. And I was like, okay, so I can't even say this is like the wrong type of hypnosis, because this I would have a chance, a good chance. And I was also getting tired of therapists who had no sense of humor, so I was hoping he was going to be a stick in the mud. On the contrary, he was known for being a complete and utter goofball. And he also even took my insurance, so I didn't have to pay him $150 for a session. So after just a few sessions with him, my life just changed. He encouraged this crazy hypnotherapy idea, saying, oh, well, you seem to be a natural at it yourself, And, just a few months after that, I left medical school permanently, having dealt with another issue with being transsexual. And I went to directly back to HMI, graduated with honors, and I built my practice. Also, let it go on record, I have not the slightest resemblance of an anxiety problem now.
Great.
I only have a hypno-junkie problem right now. There are worse problems to have.
Yeah, there really are. Yeah. So within that journey, within the study and within everything that you've been through, where are you at as far as just hypnosis is concerned? So that is, how do you define it? And how have you arrived at that definition? Or how do you explain? Because you made reference there in your own story about your own, preconceived ideas about what hypnosis was about and about, potentially clucking like a chicken and so on. How do you educate people and how do you explain hypnosis to your clients now?
Well, I usually say that my purpose as a hypnotist is to get them really, really relaxed. That's what mine did. Mine would, from what he said, he very rarely ever used the H word with people coming in. He would say, oh, and he actually very rarely used it with me, although he knew he could. I knew I was going to go into trance when he's like, it seems like you need some relaxation. And so now I tell them my purpose is to get you basically as relaxed as you can be without falling asleep. And I might give them some examples, about what might happen. Your legs might not go numb, and that's fine. And that I would also, tell them that trance was pretty natural, and state they've probably been in trance before. Maybe I would, depending on the individual person. I've worked with several people who don't have driver's licenses, so I stopped using this example. But I usually give the thing about highway hypnosis.
Yeah, right.
And now I don't do that because I've been running into people without driver's licenses, and I was like, okay, well, you can have passenger highway hypnosis.
Yeah.
Or I'll tell them, do you ever read? Okay, do you like have you ever gotten lost in such a good book that your spouse, if they're married, of course, shouts at you so many times that you don't hear them? Yeah, you're probably in some state of trance right there. Or, even in a TV show, same thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I usually do. And I usually tell them because in my pre-talk, I always talk about the cluck like a chicken thing. And I said, look, the odds are that you are not going to do anything in trance that you won't do when drunk. And I always point out, I was like, if you bark like a dog when you're drunk, maybe you will do it in trance, but I'm not going to ask you to do it. If you're unlikely to give your credit card number out when drunk, you're probably not going to give it to me no matter how much I beg.
Yeah.
And I always make the joke about if I could get that type of information out in all fairness, hypnotherapy does pay well. It doesn't pay that well. I would own a small, island off the coast somewhere. I would not be doing hypnotherapy. You guys, you would not be seeing me for months at a time. I'd own my own plane, have food shipped in, dropped off, and the person would leave.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this then. So how has that been influenced, and where have those influences come from? Tell me a little bit about your major influences within the field. Tell me a little bit about perhaps the books and the authors that have been most influential upon you, or that have taught you the most, and teachers that have been most influential upon you, and perhaps some of the reasons why.
Well, I do try to learn from everyone, regardless of who they are, and
good.
I certainly have my own preferences. I will state I have a fondness for Erickson's work, partially because you have to hit me indirectly. If you go directly with me, I'm going to say no. You basically have to trick my mind into doing almost anything. But I'm really not, sure if it's just that, but also because I'm from a family of storytellers. If you ask any one of my family members, especially my mother, a question, you're going to go. The answer is going to be somewhere in this 20-minute story. Mm. And you're going to probably figure it out on your own, and she's probably never going to say it. My husband has a theory, though. Would you like to hear what his theory is?
Yes, tell me.
His theory is that I love the color purple, and I would rather be in pajamas all day. But in all fairness, I liked Erickson long before I learned about the purple pajama thing. Mm. I also, my therapist doesn't ever want me to say it, but I did learn a lot from him. Mm-hmm. Paul Leslie is the guy's name. He's written several books, including Potential Not Pathology. Mm-hmm. He also has a podcast, which I have to be careful not to listen to because I'm so, conditioned to his voice that if I listen to that on the, in the car, which is where I usually listen to podcasts, nothing positive can happen about that. I will probably go, doop, and that will happen to me. Now, if anybody has ever been on that podcast or has influenced him, they probably have influenced me just because I took so much of that. And him being another person very influenced by Erickson, he's like the only Ericksonian in the area. So I think I did pick the correct person because now I got to see this, have it worked, right there on me.
Yeah.
When I attended HMI, they don't do a lot of Ericksonian. Their influence is Kappas, John Kappas.
Yeah.
But I haven't really been influenced by them nearly as much. You'll hear that come out when I discuss relationship issues.
Yeah.
I will just go off on their emo and phys sexuality.
Yeah.
But I would say probably 90% it probably ends up being some form of Ericksonian.
Yeah. Oh well, that's interesting to hear. So tell me then, throughout the time that you've been exploring this field, studying it, what's been one of the most impressive applications of hypnosis that you've directly witnessed, Melvin?
Well, this one isn't one I've directly witnessed, but I directly experienced. Yeah. Now, cool. I've been in chronic pain since I was little.
Yeah.
I had precocious puberty, and things developed very, very early, especially my breasts. And I basically injured my back. I've had a back problem since I was 8 years old, which is really bad, but it happens.
Yeah.
I ended up learning self-hypnosis very young, not knowing that's what I was doing. But as I've gotten more experience, I've been able to, do more and more. Unfortunately, there was this one time it worked a little overly well. Since I was used to doing this and started doing this when I was young, before I really knew better, I never thought to give myself any note saying, okay, well, you still have to notice acute pain because it could be a problem. I didn't. Last year, I had some minor discomfort for a few weeks, but it was one of those not enough to bother anyone with it. You know, you ever had a situation like that? I'm fine, don't worry. Eventually, I go to the doctor, which is, by the way, about a 6-hour round trip because I'm transgender and I have to be careful about who I go to.
Sure.
But I went to see him after my EMT training kicked in and said something doesn't look right, and I wanted a second opinion. So I go to the doctor. I didn't even change out of my pajamas because I felt so off. And they said, "Oh, Mel, you're crazy." They said there's absolutely nothing. It was not nothing. Within 2 days, I finally go to the ER. I was finally concerned enough. It turns out my gallbladder had ruptured sometime prior from a 1-inch gallstone.
Oh dear.
I was septic. I was told I was very lucky I was still alive. And they were absolutely astounded that I drove myself. They're like, you shouldn't be able to even move. They also knew I was an EMT, so I caught additional flag for not doing anything sooner.
Yeah.
And, you know, the doctors refused to give me pain meds, or at least one of them refused to give me pain meds because I was transgender after the emergency surgery I had.
Oh, fine.
I was in so much pain. I literally asked if there was a hypnotist on staff because I actually had to cancel my hypnotherapy appointment to do this emergency surgery, which probably was a good idea anyway. They used my request for a hypnotherapist as evidence I was being snuck drugs, and so denied me the medication.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so I had to do my best to keep calm and try to take the edge off using self-hypnosis until I could get back to my PCP and actually get real medication. But still, it was very impressive because I should have apparently been dead, and I was just like, okay, now is the time I need to go. to go. Yeah, you should have been dead 3 days ago.
Wow.
I thought that was particularly impressive.
Yeah, and I'm guessing if you've had an experience like that, you know, you have some pretty major commitment to the efficacy of what hypnosis can do, and I'm guessing that comes through, that kind of level of conviction will potentially come through with the people that you're working with.
Oh yeah, I also usually will tell them if I don't want to discuss the gallbladder story. And especially if people want to come in, you know, want to discuss surgical hypnosis and such, I will point out that I had a baby 14 years ago. So I always want to say it's a little while ago. Yeah, well, it wasn't that long ago. It was 14 years. I did a home birth, and I hated doctors. I was terrified of them, and I was not in any pain. I was not taught breathing exercises. I was not taught. I didn't really have a great concept of hypnosis at the time, but I had, except for the fact I had chronic pain, so I knew that there were areas I could just basically start tuning off or tuning down. So I had 13 hours. I did my homework for the first 6-7 hours of labor, and hid it from everyone in my family. And then a few years later, I'm dead serious. And a few years later, had a root canal from another person who refused to give me pain medication, had a root canal just using hypnosis.
Wow.
I still wasn't a fully trained hypnotist yet, but I knew how to turn off my arms. You know, I knew how to turn off my legs.
Yeah.
I've shut off various parts of my body. Oh, I've never shut off my mouth before. I need to figure out how to shut off my mouth now. And I basically tensed off, one set of nerves at a time until I found the one that they were pressing around, and it turned off. And they actually thought I fell asleep during the root canal. I was like, no, I was just doing everything possible to distort time to make this go faster.
Yeah. I bet. Brilliant. I love hearing stuff like that, especially root canal. You know, I mean, that's some hardcore stuff.
Yeah, that was not comfortable.
If if you go back then to the beginning of your journey, you know, when you started out learning about hypnosis and planning and plotting to be a hypnotherapist, you know, knowing what you know now, is there anything that you do differently? Is there any advice the person that you are today would give that younger version of you setting out on this this journey? And would you extend any of that advice to our listeners?
Well, there are a few different things I would say. The main thing I would say to the younger me would be to grab his shoulders and say, dude, consider this a job in hypnotherapy and don't waste time with medical school. That's one of the things I would say.
Yeah.
And another thing that I would extend to everybody, because this is a great piece of advice, is I would say never trust a smiling cat and go with your gut on people. There have been a few times, frequently with other hypnotists, where I didn't go with my gut and I ended up very, very hurt. So, you know, your gut's telling you something for a reason. Try to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, your subconscious knows more than you do.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
And I think that was an Erickson quote, actually. Man, he's influencing me accidentally now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you know, we're going to talk a lot more about hypnosis, about transgender issues, and working with those. For now, Melvin, where can people go to learn more about your work and approach to hypnosis online?
Well, my website is afterhourshypnotherapy.com.
Yeah.
You can also simply, you know, search my name.
Yeah.
Search my name and hypnosis. I assure you I will come up everywhere.
Great.
I'm also on Psychology Today. If you're in the Augusta, Georgia area,
yeah,
you know, you can just search for me, and I'm one of the only hypnotherapists on there.
Yeah, great. We will have a link to the website afterhourshypnotherapy.com over at this episode's page of the Hypnosis Weekly website. Melvin, thank you very much. It's been really good getting a flavour of you. We will be back with Melvin Marsh in just a few minutes' time. I really enjoyed that. We'll be back with Melvin in a short while. Instead of the usual hypnosis in the news section, I wanted to discuss a topic that means a great deal to me. I wrote a blog article on this topic and felt it was pertinent for me to mention it here too. Currently, I'm on tenterhooks. I'm filled with anxious anticipation and suspense following my recent submission of an academic paper to a peer-reviewed journal. My paper is going to be the first of its kind. It's a very particular type of systematic literature review. It's being offered to a more prestigious journal than some of the hypnosis journals that I'm more familiar with. And I just can't help but feel some apprehension with regards to the feedback. Some of the peer review board have differing theoretical stances than those presented within my paper. Some have written books and carried out research themselves about differing approaches, and so I've had some slight opposition and recommendations, as well as having some notions suggested for inclusion and development of my future research direction and my work going forward. I have put hours and hours of my time and effort into this particular research. I've worked incredibly hard, I've invested myself heavily, and I naturally feel protective over it. You know, I could get defensive. Yet I think it's wonderful to receive feedback from fellow researchers, academics and authors that I've long looked up to. It's truly exhilarating to have a robust critique of my work and to have it scrutinised. My work gets better as a result, and I get better as a result in a number of different ways. Regularly I go and look at the reviews that my books and my audio programs have received online. It's not without a slight sense of trepidation on occasion, but when it's properly qualified and constructive, I take it on board and do all I can to respond to it. You know, the toughest criticism we receive is often the place where we grow, where we develop and learn the most, and I typically look at it as a way to get better. At the end of courses, seminars, training events that I run and that my college runs, I hand out feedback forms so that we can get anonymous, structured feedback and we can refine, develop and make our educational offerings better. Every top quality training that I have been on did just that, in line with top quality educational standards and methods and so on. Or the poor quality trainings I attended did nothing of the sort. You guys will know, you regular listeners will know, when working with individual clients for hypnotherapy, you want to get honest feedback about how they're getting on and how things can be done better. This is going to help them more. We'll get better results as hypnotherapists and we become more effective. The use of feedback forms, measuring scales, engaging in reflective practice, having regular supervision. These are all ways of ensuring we look to grow, develop and improve as hypnotherapists. It's a central part of how we all should be working. Yet I encounter a trend, a proliferation of the classic head in the sand attitudes among so many hypnotherapists who fear asking for solid feedback or constructive criticism, who take it personally instead of seeing it as an opportunity to grow, and who just want to crack on regardless, insisting they know best. There are so many contributing reasons for this attitude, but one big contributory factor, in my opinion, is the very culture of hypnotherapy training and CPD, continued professional development, and training courses that are offered, because they themselves do not offer or create a culture of wanting to grow and develop, and very often instead will offer up a singular, impervious to critique type of attitude that does no one any good in the long run. Many hypnotherapy training courses offered to the public these days are a singular model devised by the school founder and the lead trainer. Some are excellent, I am sure, yet there's no critique offered. They virtually sell the singular model and extol all the reasons that it's so good, but do not offer up the other side of the debate or offer up potential criticisms of their model or their favoured approach. However good the training is, the depth of education is always going to be lacking if there's not a transparent approach to what's being taught. Schools, colleges, universities will always offer up the stance of fierce critics as well as those supporting a particular viewpoint. Even if the teacher sympathises with a particular side, the critique of that side needs to be taught and explored, and this is quality education. That's education full stop. This is how a student learns. This is how a field of study grows. When hypnotherapy trainings simply say this is the way it is and do not allow for any critique, or they get all precious and sensitive as something's critiqued, it halts the potential for growth and development, and currently the field of hypnotherapy is held back by so many people doing just that. Likewise, there are then those individual hypnotherapists and hypnotherapy training schools offering adjunctive CPD techniques that they have devised, many of which are excellent. I'm not taking away from that. Yet the teacher or the pioneer, the deviser, gets defensive. Perhaps if they're asked for evidence of that technique. They get defensive when a criticism is offered up. They get defensive if someone cannot seem to get it to work for them. And they take anything other than glowing praise as an attack. And it's crazy. They need to listen, be respectful and open with regards to what's being said, and use it as an opportunity to grow, develop, and ultimately refine what's being offered. Some just dismiss such requests and feedback with this sort of anti-intellectual stance that I've spoken about before here on this podcast. We must be able to take criticism and learn from it and develop and improve, not just circle the wagons and start shooting at everyone who dares do so. They're not just holding themselves back, they're holding the entire hypnotherapy field back by creating a culture and role modelling a culture that many hypnotherapists then take back into their hypnotherapy rooms when working with clients. And they will not improve if they hold on to that same reticence to be open to criticism and feedback. When engaging in training, I tell all of my students not to just take my word for things, but to go and explore the field and develop an informed and well-educated stance of their own based upon the evidence that we present, the critiques that we present, as well as their own preferences. The importance of critical thinking is pretty absent in the vast majority of hypnotherapy trainings. When we see the need for it in life in general these days, surely we can recognise how important it really is within a therapeutic environment and within the mental health field in general. We need to be comfortable asking questions about hypnotherapy training, not hiding in fear in case the trainer gets defensive. Likewise, we need to get better at thinking for ourselves because so many hypnotherapists want spoon-feeding. A good quality hypnotherapy training course should have given you knowledge and skills required to do things like hypnobirthing or offer your clients a hypnogastric band if that's what you want to do. Instead, we're happy to pay someone else to package up our existing knowledge for us and spoon-feed us on how to do just that. I've spoken before about something called Shoshin. And I'll quote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few." And that's from Shunryu Suzuki in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And Shoshin is also referred to as beginner's mind. And it's not just hypnotherapists who need to adopt this beginner's mind on occasions. It's seasoned and influential hypnotherapists and training schools who have big followings. It's hypnotherapy trainers and educators who need to know that what they offer is not everything to everyone. They need to adopt Shoshin and become humble about what they offer. They need to accept that feedback and criticism is how they will grow and develop and ultimately raise standards within our field. So learn how to take criticism well, like a grown-up. Recognise that everything we do and say is likely to have flaws. And you know what? That's okay. Nothing's perfect, so why not accept that? A quote from Henry Weisinger: "Criticism is information that will help you grow." And how about this one from Dwayne Allen Hans? "You are a glorious, shining sword, and criticism is the whetstone. Do not run from the whetstone, or you will become dull and useless. Stay sharp." Spot on, Dwayne Allen Hans. Come on, hypnotherapy trainers, training schools, hypnotherapists, you regular listeners, get on board with this. Learn how to take criticism. Okay, next up, we have this week's professional discussion then. I welcome back Melvin Marsh. When I was first communicating with Melvin online, he told me of his journey. And not only did I feel a little bit out of my depth with the subject matter, simply due to my own ignorance and naivety of it, I also thought it very rare to be encountering a man who was once a woman and who had given birth. Yet Melvin's story has even more challenge and depth to it, that in and of itself I think is fascinating and inspiring to listen to. But then to listen to the ways hypnosis and hypnotherapy has been used by him throughout his own journey and that of so many people who are transgender or have related issues is also fascinating. And as I've said, I think I've probably laboured this point. It's an area I've not really examined as far as applying hypnosis is concerned, and so I learned a great deal here, and as well as in my own subsequent research on the subject. There's loads of fascinating stuff to learn here today. So here is this week's professional discussion with Melvin Marsh. Enjoy. So I'm rejoined by this week's guest, Melvin Marsh, and we're going to be talking about transgender-related issues and hypnotherapy applications. And one of the things that I was keen to impress upon Melvin before we started recording was just a little bit of my own ignorance, a little bit of my own naivety with regards to the subject matter, and not wanting to put my foot in it, and wanting to make sure that I respected the subject matter and didn't make any major faux pas. So I think, Melvin, first of all, Could you just tell us, in perhaps the more agreeable terms, when we talk about transgender, what actually does this mean?
Well, transgender itself is actually an umbrella term. Yeah. So people actually sometimes fight about what it means. But generally, when you're looking at the word, it means anybody whose maybe gender presentation or identity and sex don't fully match. Right. Now you can have there are people that simply go off and are fine, only have minor transgender issue. Certainly nowadays there are a few things that women do that are no longer considered weird or bad, but you're looking 100 years ago would be considered a transgender issue. Mm. Women nowadays, tell a woman she can't wear jeans, she'll probably kill you. I can do what I want. 100 years ago, you wouldn't have. It would have been considered a transgender, situation because you did something that was not with your gender norms. There are other people who simply have a full or mostly full disconnect. So this whole thing is basically one giant spectrum where their brain and their body are so at odds that they want to fix one of the other, and it's much easier to fix one's body than one's brain. You can go off and have surgery or go on hormones. That's a transsexual. There are people may be aware of the fact that they're supposed to be the opposite sex, as young as say 3 or 4, or some might not realize it until much older. I know people who transitioned when they were in their 50s. So you've got a huge spectrum from minor things. Somebody may be wanting to wear a dress or not wearing a dress, or wearing jeans, to that. We also have cross-dressers who just want to do it once in a while. Yeah. Might want to do it full time. Who knows? Transvestites tends to have a more negative connotation. That's usually people who are doing it for a more sexual thing. It's not always. People are arguing over some of these terms all the time. There are even arguments over what it means to be transsexual. Does that mean, can you be a non-hormone transsexual? Realistically, yes, but the trans community will fight over the most minor of issues. I have been in this community since I was 14. I am about to turn 36. I have seen every argument that you can have for every single possible term. So you have to be very careful about just simply the terms. But you do have to be aware that it can be such a spectrum. Most people, when we think transgender, we're thinking people that are probably at one of the extreme ends, most likely just wanting to live as a member of the opposite sex, potentially having surgery. Although surgery, of course, is never a requirement. So if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that's really useful. I think that's really useful. Can you tell us a little bit about your own journey, your own story, your own background as well, Melvin?
Absolutely.
With this,
I was one of the weird people. I shouldn't say weird people because a lot of people know at a young age, but at the time it was the 80s, and that type of phrase would have been very, very weird. But I have a memory somewhere between the age of 3 and 5. I always tell people it was probably about 3 years old. But it was somewhere between 3 and 5. I remember being in my grandmother's house. They had a discussion over me being a girl. And I said, why do you tell them I'm a girl when I'm a boy? I remember, several seconds later, waking up from the ground, having been knocked unconscious by one of the people in my life. I don't have a good memory of who knocked me out because I think I was pointed in the back in a different direction, and I think it was a hit on the back of my head. So I gotten a good visual, or maybe I got knocked out so bad that I can't remember. But now you're thinking early 80s, where trans issues were kind of, that was still pretty rare. This was back when they didn't exactly have an internet. Well, they had an internet, but not a real internet, not what we think of as the internet. You basically had, bulletin board systems at your library if you were lucky. The average person didn't even know about that. I remember going through and realizing that I was very, very different from everybody else. I was definitely not like the other young girls, that's for sure. I identified much more with the young guys that I was hanging out. But I knew every time that I said anything, this was going to be something negative was going to happen to me. We didn't have a discussion again, more public, out in the open discussion, until the very early 90s. I was about 9 years old, 10 years old, and we started watching stuff like Plan 9 from Outer Space. I got really big into vampire films and very old, bad sci-fi films, and so I was a huge Bela Lugosi fan. And the director was known to occasionally dress in women's clothing. So as we learn more about this Ed Wood character, not a character, but he was a real person, but he was a character. Um, I learned more and had this discussion with my dad, and he's pointed out that some people had such an extreme issue with how they identified that some people actually could go and would have surgery performed. So this is my first introduction to trans surgery, and I was like, ooh, can they do that for me? And so he looks at me. He has this weird look on his face, which, in all fairness, it's my dad, so he always has kind of a weird look on his face. He was like, well, they can't do it your way. They can't do it female to male. So you're talking the early 90s, and that wasn't incorrect.
No.
They very rarely did female to male. That's not something that ever got discussed. It certainly never hit the news very frequently.
No.
Basically, the best thing people could hope for was basically dressed as a guy, member of the opposite sex. So I thought, again, I was the only one. Again, until I was about 20 years old. And by this point, I was in college, my junior year, and I had this friend who was working on his master's thesis, or what was going to become his master's thesis. And from him, he was a gay guy. I learned that there is a difference between gender and sex, etc. And he was discussing this, and I looked at him. I said, "Oh, so there are people that go my way." He looked at me like I was a space alien, quickly picked up his stuff and left. I went home. I Googled woman and man's body, or something similar, girl and boy's body, whatever. Yeah. You can understand where I was going.
Yeah, yeah.
And I found this whole transgender thing that this whole world the specific world I didn't know about. I had been in the LGBT community since I was 14. This is 6 years of me being in the community and not knowing about female to male transsexuals, which is, I mean, you'd think that would be a thing, but not so much. Yeah. You'd see going the other way. You'd see the gay guys. You'd see the lesbian. You'd see everybody, but this poor female to male contingent. And from there, my husband was watching NASCAR or something. Yes, I also married a redneck. You guys have a perspective of Americans watching NASCAR. Yes, I married someone who really does. And I said, honey, I think I might be a female to male transsexual. And his response was, that's nice, dear, and went right back to watching his stupid race. No offense to anybody out there who watches NASCAR, but come on, man. If your wife says something like that, that's nice, dear. Listen to. She might be trying to tell you something important. So I had to live. I started to get myself together to start living as a man for part time. Mother Nature has a sense of humor. I ended up pregnant. I was still dressing part-time like a guy, which, I mean, in all fairness, you'd think that it wouldn't be that big of a deal since women can wear men's clothing. It's more socially acceptable. Apparently, it was not so much. I got a lot of abuse from the OBGYN that I was going to. I already didn't like doctors. I had a medical phobia. That was a big thing for me. And I've had that since I was little, teeny, tiny, like baby, like 3 years old. It was my first needle phobia. So it was so much to get me to go to that doctor. And when he basically did his malarkey, okay, that's it. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I can only stand so much abuse. Went home, did the home birth, got investigated by the state of Georgia. Child Protective Services, because they found out I was transgender. Several years later, I had to continue. I had to always be on guard in case something came up. They did a surprise visit, so it continued to be part-time for a while. I went full-time in like 2007 after I graduated from graduate school.
Yeah.
So I'd already been living part-time for a number of years. See, 2002 is when I came out. So there you go. 2008, I went into the therapy because you really are supposed to have therapy so that they can prove that you're not, kind of nuts and doesn't have some other underlying problem. They did that. I got my letters. I was like, okay, I need to hold off until I get my medical phobia a little bit more control, but I wanted this in place. Went off, got my name changed 2008. By the end of 2008, I was stressing out so bad, I made an appointment for hormones and surgery. I had my chest removed. Well, my boobs removed.
Yeah, yeah.
Saying chest removed, so it sounds so weird, but I didn't have a chest. I had a shelf. I had 34 quadruple D boobs. That was a big size. It's probably TMI for your listeners, but you got to understand what people are going through.
Yeah.
And which I couldn't feel because I could not feel those things because my mind was very precise as to what it had and didn't have. It tuned off the boobs. It did not notice it. You could cut them. My mind was like, I see nothing. I went off, had surgery in 2009, and was put on hormones, and basically have been living primarily, as a guy, a very passable guy for the most part, ever since. If we did this interview, last week, you would have seen the world's bushiest beard. I literally had to shave yesterday because I'm doing some videos tonight, and I needed to look presentable. So
Yeah.
I can grow a beard better than almost any, man who was born male. Just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, certainly you seem that way to me. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Melvin. Just tell me then, what are the kind of issues? And I know it's very difficult to generalise, but some of the typical issues that you find your transgender clients present.
Well, actually, I have a few things that they come in for the most frequent. Most frequently, there's some form of anxiety problem.
Yeah.
That's easy. Well, that's so easy to work with.
Yeah.
A lot of them have come in with some form of abuse.
Yeah.
And a huge amount of the LGBT population has been sexually abused. And frequently they are already in therapy for something else. So I'm just an additional, person to help with that. Yeah. I'm happy to work with their therapists. I just don't want to go in and do too much unless I absolutely know for certain there is another therapist who has my back.
Yeah. Yeah.
If their session is over and I can't continue to work with them in session, because I have no problems running my sessions a little bit over. If something comes up,
yeah, I'm
happy to hash it out. But I want to make sure that they've got somebody there with them, as well. So I deal with a lot of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
So much, it's crazy. Also, the LGBT community tends to have issues with weight loss and smoking. So usually you're gonna see that, of course. Yeah. But mostly what I get is the anxiety and stress disorders.
Yeah. I can imagine. And so, how typically how does hypnotherapy feature, and how does it become useful specifically, in terms of transgender natured issues?
Well, of course, we always tackle things that, of course, that are not transgender specific, of course.
Of course.
And so our first sessions are probably going to look very similar to how they would work with anybody.
Sure.
But I'm just going to ask a few additional questions so that I have it in my notes, because of course I take brief notes on everybody, but I want to make sure that I ask the questions beforehand.
Yeah.
If it's a trans person, I'm like, okay, well, what is your feeling about being, trans? Are you comfortable with this part of you? How are your parents taking it? I'm gathering more information than I would gather for, I don't want to say a normal patient, but a non-LGBT patient.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel bad saying normal, but it's
yeah. I understand.
You understand.
One of my concerns was about using certain terminology that might seem just rude or wrong, and so on myself as well.
Yeah, it's so. Because saying non-LGBT sounds really weird.
Yeah.
Or non-queer sounds kind of weird, and some people get offended by the word queer. It gets ridiculous. But I do actually have a different set of questions that I add to the LGBT people, so I get a better understanding about where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I will ask way more detailed questions about mom, dad, siblings. They're more likely to have experienced homelessness, drug addiction.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask more questions about that, especially if they don't come up, bring that up already.
Yeah.
A lot of times they will, and especially to me because I'm trans as well. So we're speaking literally in a completely different, cultural issue. We've got our own culture and community going on. Sometimes two transgender people will get together and nobody will be able to understand them outside of the community.
But that's I'm guessing that makes it a much safer environment in therapy. Somebody that's familiar with with things like terminology and with things like having some of the empathy and some of the insight to that world.
And it does. I know that several of my doctors are gay. I feel a little bit better coming to them for certain issues than I would a straight person.
Yeah.
Like my primary care doctor is gay, so I know that there are some times that I will just say, do not give me a nurse. You're going to send me to Dr. Perry, so I can communicate more directly and say the exact phrases I mean in the way that he understands it, that I will get better care.
Yeah.
And if you spend enough time with the LGBT community, you will pick up the vocabulary, and they will get to the point where it'll be just like talking to another member of the community, because you're there, you're learning. My gender therapist, she was so well known in the community that we would talk so freely in front of her that it was like she wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And so she learned a lot, but we didn't hide our terms from her. We just ignored her because she was not a threat.
Yeah.
And she wasn't an outsider.
Yeah.
So I do realize I'm in a very lucky position that I can ask certain questions that maybe a non-transgender therapist, a hypnotherapist or whatnot, might not be able to easily ask, especially on the first session.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can imagine that. I'm definitely, it's. I think it must therefore be some comfort to that community to have and know that they're a therapist, and likewise for you to have doctors that have had access to the community and have access to and an understanding, which makes which makes for a very different experience. Are there therefore, some particular differences or specialist considerations with transgender clients, do you think?
Your biggest thing, I mean, if you do some type of inner child work,
right,
that's when you're really going to have to potentially ask questions before you even get in there. I don't care if this is the first session or 10 sessions down the road, but there are questions that you are going to have to ask. It will help to know how they want you to refer to themselves as a child. I'm pretty cool. I'm one of those people who does not have a stick up their butt. If you want to address me if I'm doing some type of inner child work, it doesn't matter if you address young Melvin as a he, a she, or whatever. You can you can refer to my younger self as Mindy, which was the nickname I had growing up. I will respond to it. I'm not going to be insulted. I'm not going to be offended. There was a situation. I was coming in. I was literally getting my last few certification hours. I was with another hypnotherapist and her student.
Yeah.
And we were just basically taking turns, rotating through and hypnotizing each other. And she was using me as an example because I'm easy. I'm a somnambulist. It's, oh, come on, watch this. And, she's doing all sorts of weird things to me. And finally she asks, what do I want to actually work on? And I gave her something to work on. And she said, okay, well, let's find out where this root of this issue started. What was the earliest thing you remember that's related? So as I'm, kind of, deep in trance,
yeah.
And I'm reliving an experience that happened when I was about 3 or 4, which is not something that Stephanie was expecting at any point that day, or else we probably would have discussed the student and told us to warn the student. But I started coming up because, I became very aware of this guy. I can't remember what his name is, but he's one of his students, so somebody very, very new to the field. I came up and said, oh, by the way, I'm transgender. Oh, by the way, I'm very open about it. I've even had kids, so don't be too surprised if stuff like that comes up. And about 3 seconds later, I'm back almost unconscious because, it's fun to kind of be a somnambulist, sometimes. You say the word trance, I'm halfway gone. I probably have drifted into trance about 5 or 6 times already in during this podcast interview. And so I go back to where I was working, and, it would have been more helpful for if Stephanie had realized that there is the distinct possibility that they were going to hit things that perhaps a discussion beforehand would have been good. To find out, hey, if we happen to be talking to your inner child, which was, I didn't realize I was actually going to get a trance at all during this, or else I probably would have made a suggestion that was maybe not dealing with a confidence issue. But we could have said, she should have said, perhaps asked earlier, well, in the event that we're in this situation, what pronoun should I use? And in or out of trance, I'm going to say something similar. It's going to be like, I really don't care. Which I care when we're talking about me in present day.
Yeah.
If past, if you go back a certain point, I do not care one iota. I know who I am, regardless. If you ever see my dreams, I flip-flop between the two sexes depending on what else is around in my dream. Sure. Like if I'm having a dream when I'm back in Girl Scouts, I'm going to see myself as a boy. If I'm down at my father's work, which was all male, I'm going to see myself as a girl. I'm kind of flexible that way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Some people are, some people aren't. I don't suffer from little dick syndrome, so I'm very cool. I'm actually one of the most laid back trans people out there, which is kind of sad. But Stephanie probably should have asked. Probably should have, maybe warned the student.
Yeah.
Or had me warn the student. But again, I don't think anybody realized that I was going to go from basically a 35-year-old male who was being put into weird positions and holding them because I'm fun to muck with, to that was the most silent induction ever. She just picked up my arm, just gestured towards the palm, and I was like, hey, and gone. Well, she was continuing to teach, but I don't think anybody would have really realized that I was going to be doing some inner child work at that particular moment on that particular day.
Yeah.
Always prepare and know what you're about to go into, I think, would be a good plan regardless.
Yeah. I find this so fascinating, and could talk for much longer. But heck, we are out of time. So people want to come and learn more, or people that are that have an interest or issues of this kind can contact you via your website, www.afterhourshypnotherapy.com.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So, all that leaves me to say, Melvin, thank you for being this week's guest, and giving so generously here on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed that. My thanks to Melvin for his candour and for sharing his expertise on this subject matter. On to this week's evidence-based hypnosis factoid of the week. The fact of the week is this: self-hypnosis reduces pain and improves mood of women with metastasised carcinoma of the breast. You'd be amazed how many retakes I've had to record with regards to getting the word metastasised correct in my mind. I've just been chewing and mewing it ridiculously. Anyway, so Spiegel and Bloom conducted a study back in 1983 that investigated the pain and mood disturbances of women with metastasised carcinoma of the breast over the course of 1 year. And those who were taught self-hypnosis exercises for 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the group therapy sessions experienced significantly less self-reported pain over the course of the year than those just experiencing the group therapy sessions. As well as the direct effect upon the pain and the discomfort, the authors partly attributed the outcome to the effect of the self-hypnosis treatment upon mood. That is, the self-hypnosis trained group experienced significantly lowered mood disturbances, often associated with pain, helping those in the group to experience diminished pain and suffering throughout the year of the study. So yes, indeed, there you have it. Self-hypnosis reduces pain and improves mood of women with metastasized carcinoma of the breast. And a link to that research paper, of which there's a full PDF available online, is included on this episode's page of the Hypnosis Weekly website. So, that's it for this week's 76th edition. I do have many more exciting guests that I'll welcome to Hypnosis Weekly. In coming weeks too, we'll be discussing, debating, celebrating, and above all, remaining friends. I'll be away next week because I'm going to be hanging out with a hero of mine, Professor Irving Kirsch, and I'll be out of town with some other projects too. However, I return with a special edition featuring founder of the UK Hypnosis Convention, Nick Ebden. All the references made in the discussions along with related links are posted at each episode on the Hypnosis Weekly website, www.hypnosis-weekly.com. I absolutely welcome your thoughts, comments, suggestions and questions, so do please message me or add them on the Hypnosis Weekly website and I'll make sure they are addressed, answered and explored accordingly. Please do share this podcast on Facebook, Twitter and anywhere else and really help us reach the hypnosis field. Thanks again to Melvin Marsh. My thanks to you, as always, for tuning in. I love you all very much. My name is Adam Eason. This has been Hypnosis Weekly. Until next time, goodbye for now.